The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network. How do you find the time? You have you got a regional director role. You're operating really more as at the vice president level. We've talked about titles before where you got to look at responsibilities, right? Regional vice presidents become regional directors. Directors become managers. You have 6 hospitals. You're soon to have 6 hospitals. You got 7 service lines. In all intents and purposes, VP level. How do you, though, find the time or make the time for succession planning, mentorship? Because I'd imagine that's probably the easiest thing that you could kind of fall away from, right? I just don't have the time because you have all these other priorities. How do you prioritize succession planning, mentorship, employee growth?
I analyze the leaders, and I'm very intentional when I talk to the hospital presidents about what they're good at and what and what you want to see from an organizational standpoint if you were to put them in my position. Interestingly enough, between those hospitals, between those 6 hospitals, and I'll use facilities as an example. There are 3 leaders that are covering that much ground, and they're all very different.
So you have 3 facilities leaders under you for those 6 hospitals. So those,
Yeah, for those 6 hospitals and a couple, a few freestanding EDs. It's a huge swath of real estate that they're responsible for covering. They got great support below them. Their supervisors are absolutely fantastic. But with that group and with the other service lines, they're structured the same way. We call it the triad. And so what we've done is we created a leadership organization that mirrors the hospital presidents, or as an old coach would say, one throat to choke. So 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 it's what it does is that it's an enhanced process of understanding who's there. If we mirror, the expectations that the presidents have, that line of sight is absolutely visible. And you're not juggling these different balls because everything is different from this service line to this service line if you keep it consistent. And so when we talk about succession planning and we talk about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? And we do our war for talent. I call it a war for talent. It's one of BO's Sodexo concepts. When we talked about succession planning and high potential and some of the other things, we talk about the strengths and the things that they need to work on. And so what I hammer on more than anything is identifying what they're really, really strong at. And Trinity is as an organization, and Mount Carmel in particular has done a really good job at identifying StrengthsFinder to see that these are the things that make you shine, and these are the things that make me leery. And so instead of just arbitrarily leaning into the things that make you leery, you need to understand the why. So succession planning from there is saying that, hey, listen, those things that make you leery as a regional director or as a vice president, they're going to stare you in the face. The minute you open the door, they're going to be there to greet you every day. So at some point you got to confront it. And on the opposite side of fear is courage, right? And opportunity. How do we get from the fear side to the opportunity side? And part of that is around just understanding it and doing a slow burn to develop it as much as possible. So what I try to do is make sure that personally, from a personal development standpoint, you are leaning into your strengths. And my job is to personally develop you to look at that fear that you have or something that you consider a weakness and then flip that into a strength. I'll give an example. Perfect one. One of the best ones is I have a leader who is a technical savant. All right, degree in engineering from Ohio State University. One of the smartest people you could ever meet. You know what I mean? Like, can figure out any technical thing. Does not like to speak about it. You know what I mean? And then when he speaks about it, It's extremely technical. So one of the things that I always have to do is say, hey, listen, remember that you are not speaking to your counterparts. You're not at a conference or anything like that. You're speaking to someone who really in the moment only has three questions for you. What happened?
Yeah, yeah.
Will it cripple us?
Yep,
How do we get it fixed?
yep.
You know, and I said, so I want you, and he's got two beautiful daughters. Okay. And I said, so when you're explaining the complexities of life to your daughters, like what does that feel like? And he smiles and he starts explaining these complex items. So well, we
Oh,
were
wow.
talking about the planet, and he started breaking it all down, how gravity works. And I'm like, I got a degree in biology, man. And I've never broken it down that way. I said, so when you're talking about why an entire elevator bank failed because we had groundwater coming in through the wall and basically we had to use sub pumps to get everything out. I said, I want you to explain it that way.
Yeah, it's pretty
You know,
simple.
so, yeah. And I said, I want you to simplify it the same way you simplified the explanation of how gravity works and why planets are round and some of and you know and thermodynamics. He was like, I said, are we talking about thermodynamics? He was like, exactly what it is. I'm just like, you just broke down thermodynamics in the wave of a 5-year-old. I was like, that's amazing. I said, so let's talk about some of the stuff that we do technically. And it's completely opened him up, you know, and he says, well, you know, I want to make sure that they understand that it's important. I said, oh, they do. I said, the byproduct shows you that it's important. The fact that the elevator bank is completely shut down
Right.
has already shown them that it's important. What I need you to do is explain it to them in a way that they understand what degree of difficulty it's going to take to get it fixed and to get it pushed through. And so he's done a really fantastic job at making sure that he facilitates those requests that way. And it's completely changed the outlook of him as being a future leader. It's given him more confidence, and it's given him more confidence to be able to speak up and talk about other things. So now when we have to report out some of the challenges that we have from a facility standpoint in the huddle, he's open to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not nervous. There's no stuttering or anything like that. I mean, he even did one that I thought was a master class where he drew it on the board. He said, so this is he was talking about a transition, but he's like a transistor. This is a transit, and he's drawing it out. And he was like, this is how this works. And
Wow.
and he said, this is what's broken. It's going to take us about 4 hours to fix it. And it's going to require something that's a little bit different. And everybody was like, the president was like, hey, I went outside and looked at mine just to make sure. So anytime you can explain something that happens, that's an everyday part of what we do, and you can teach somebody something new, you are absolutely ready to go.
Yeah.
And so that's just a microcosm of what I'm trying to do to each one of the leaders in every service line based on their differences and some of the things that they consider to be fears. Let's take it from a fear. Let's make it into a strength. Let's add it to the box and let's keep moving. And when you decide that you want to move on, you're going to be ready.
Yeah.
You know, and I tell everybody, I said, I believe that this team can run circles around anybody. A, because I'm hyper competitive, and B, because of the fact that I really truly believe it. And they work so hard that the ability for you to be able to play hard and go on vacation and do some of those other things is a byproduct of your ability to come in and just deliver results over and over again. And part of the reason why Mount Carmel is able to have success now and sustain it is because the teams got tired of losing. You know, so bringing it back to coaching, when I got here, we were probably on a 3-4 game losing streak. We had a couple of issues with Legionella and everything else that were going on. And the attitude affected, you know, everything that was the noise affected their attitudes and how they saw everything. You know, there was a little PTSD from those situations. And I said, aren't you tired of losing? You know, and whoever told you that we're losing because of you? Like, we didn't cause this, but it's our responsibility to bring us out of it. And so they have a championship mentality. They believe that they can compete with anyone in the country. They believe that they have value at this organization. And I haven't lost a single leader since I've been here, that they've all moved into different roles, higher roles within Trinity, that have served them well. So I'm truly proud of them. Yeah, I will never take credit for that, but what I will say was that I did have a small opportunity to meet them and to really understand what they were really good at. And if I did anything, the only thing I did was I brought to light all of the cool stuff that at the time nobody was seeing. So that's where we are.
Well, and you know what, in facilities, I'm just focusing on the facilities part. Obviously, you have more than facilities under you. That's really half of the battle, because they never do focus on the good things they do. It's always when you get called out, or I mean, you think about everything they perform on a daily basis, they just kind of take it for granted, and you need somebody to call it out. How long did it take you? You're talking about let's put you on the 4-game losing streak, not a 3 or 4 game. How long though did it take to change that thought process and turn them? Was it a year? Was it 6 months, 18 months? How long did it take you to turn that around?
It was easily a year. It was easily a year because when and part of that was when I got here, we were still dealing with the after effects of some of those, some of that negative publicity, some of those things that were happening at the system, and it's like that. I mean, when you come from a culture of winning, and being a certain way for so long. And when you get punched in the mouth like that, it has a tendency to jar you a little bit. And so one of the first things I wanted to work on was to get them out of that mindset. And number two, I think the biggest thing was to get them to move on. Like, hey, we got to focus on today. So we have to work on a plan, that's going to galvanize our departments here. I mean, we had all types of issues. I mean, the economy was being propped up at the time, on some things that are starting to fall short today, right? So we were competing with the Amazons and some of the other companies around because they needed more people to be out and be working because we were starting to get to the end of the pandemic. So the challenges were changing. They were shifting, they were moving. And so I needed everybody to be pliable. And I needed you to understand that what it looks like today and whatever hard decisions we had to make today, they're going to look completely different tomorrow. The other thing is some of the byproducts of the losing streak was that they were so bad, everybody was frozen in making decisions because they didn't want anything to come back on them as a bad decision, because some of these situations that we were in as an organization happened because some folks made some really, really, really questionable decisions. And so you got to get them off the couch and just be like, hey, listen, we're going to make this decision today because this is a decision that we have to make from a financial standpoint, from a financial stewardship standpoint, from an organizational leadership standpoint, and understand that if we have to pivot, we will. And one of the things that I think was a little jarring from a leadership standpoint was me standing in front of all of the presidents and what we call the executive operations team. And when they say, hey, Donya, you decided that we didn't need a painter a year ago. Well, painting is this much, and it'll cost us 3 times the price to have a painting. Well, yesterday's price is not today's price.
Right.
And so when they look at me at a straight face and they say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, that was the decision that I had to make at the time.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people have ever heard the truth that way.
Yep.
I had to make that decision at the time. I had to decide, was it more efficient for me to have a boiler technician, which it absolutely is, that, or to have a carpenter or a painter or anything like that. They're all valuable. They all matter. But the reality is that we needed to make sure that we were operating at a high level. This was a decision I had to make with the understanding that if we needed to pivot, we can.
Exactly.
If you're saying we need to pivot, we got to go pivot.
That's right.
But I'm not going to ever stand here and up-a-dub as to why I made a decision. I know exactly why I made the decision. And we call it standing on business. I'm gonna stand on business and say that it was the right decision at the time. Now, if we got to change, then we definitely will change. Like if there's a huge project coming up, then I'm going to talk about, well, let's talk about recruitment and how we can sustain this going forward. But what we're not going to do is take all of the efforts of all of the hard work and all of the tough decisions that all these leaders across the system had to make, And just because we're experiencing a little success, we're going to undo it, or we're going to deviate back to what we used to be,
Yep.
you know. And so it's a interesting conundrum, because even folks that are in extreme positions of authority and able to make big decisions, sometimes you got to remind them that hey, listen, this was the right thing to do at the time, and
Yeah.
it's okay to say, you know what, we need to deviate today.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think there needs to be more of that. All right. So I am talking to my guest, Donya Brown. Donya, Regional Director of Facilities Management Support Services at Mount Carmel Health System, Columbus, Ohio. Thank you for your time. We've talked before. You have a really interesting background. You talked about you have your degree in biology. You've mentioned that you worked for Sodexo, third-party services provider. You've your career has shown progressive leadership, kind of more starting out in the EVS, but then expanding into more and more service lines and roles. I always am intrigued, and it's probably from the recruiting days. I always like hearing kind of career journeys. So tell us a bit about kind of that expansion from third-party services provider to hospital employee, expanding beyond EVS into facilities, but also as a biology major, how did a biology major end up in this? And I know, it's people go all different paths, but how did a bio major, which I would have failed out on, how did a bio major find himself as a regional director in healthcare over facilities, construction, security, safety?
Well, I mean, I was all over the place. I mean, I was a complete. I mean, although I was a jock. Like I was a complete nerd as it was relating to health, and I really did think that I wanted to have a career in epidemiology.
Did you?
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, all things gross, right,
Yeah.
and stuff that'll kill you. And when
Because
I
the jocks
started.
usually don't take the bio major, right? You would
Yeah, no, I mean, which is, I mean, I actually studied, but I learned really quick. Like I was not going to the NFL.
have.
It's like, man, I gotta study.
I know. I know.
But I mean, what I can tell you is I thought I wanted to get into medicine, right? And specifically, and so I leaned into getting my degree in biology with the understanding that I was going to take the MCAT. And so as I got towards my senior year, and I started getting closer, you started to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I realized I didn't want to do that. So I'm sitting here. I know I'm getting this degree, right? I mean, it's a
Yep.
it's a it's a good degree, but at the same time, I had to go home and tell my mom that, Mom, I don't want to be a doctor.
Yeah. Was her
And
question, what are you going to do with a bio degree?
yeah, she was just like, "What are you talking about? Like, this was the plan." And I was just like, "I'm going to be a really mediocre doctor. Like, I don't want to be a C doctor." And that's not a knock on doctors. This is just a knock on me. Like, I would
Yeah.
have been I
Yeah.
would have been atrocious, I'm quite sure. And so I wanted to pivot really, really quick. And so what I realized is that I love to be around people, right? I mean, I grew up in a really big family. I'm the oldest of five kids. And so um I really started to learn a little bit more about myself. And so I thought training and facilitation was what I wanted to do. And so I got my first opportunity for a really small company that was operating a hospital right outside of where school was. And I remember more than anything, he's like, "Hey, listen, I'm gonna pay you $26,000 salary."
Yep. Yep.
And for the first 3 months, like, you're going to do housekeeping. And I
Yeah.
was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, you're going to be in the OR, you're going to be in the ED. I want you to learn. And then you're going to help us build a training and development program because we love your organization." And I said, "Okay." And so for 3 months, I was in housekeeping. Like every day, I was working third shift in the ED.
Well,
My girlfriend, who was at the time now my wife, was dropping me off at work at 11 o'clock to work the night shift, and I would clean the ED all day. And so I
wow.
had this reputation of like, hey, can you bring Donya in here to do this discharge? And can you send Donya in here to do this OR case? And like the week before my 90 days, I completely forgot. Like I was a part of the team and everything else. And this was a really good lesson in leadership. And that lesson was, don't ever do that. Because I had indoctrinated myself to being a part of that team. I was
Yeah.
young at the time. I was in my early 20s. I was working with, and this was at the time. I'm old enough to be at a place where some of the folks that were working in environmental services had been working there for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Like this is what they did, right?
Yeah.
And I really endeared myself to that team and some of the things that you probably don't necessarily learn as a manager or as a leader. And the owner of the company comes down and he says, "Hey, listen, next Monday, I want you here in a shirt and tie." And I said, "Oh, okay." He was like, "Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get started and introduce you as the manager, and then we'll go from there." Completely by surprise process, wasn't communicated and everything else. And so that was one of the first real hard lessons that I learned about the gap, the
Yeah.
invisible gap that is between our frontline colleagues and leadership. And they didn't take it well because there were private conversations. There were things that they felt about the organization. And so when I walk in the door and I got on a
Wow.
shirt and tie and
Yeah.
I had been this the entire time, they felt deceived. And so I spent the first 6 months. I mean, I was developing a training program, but my title was an operations manager. And I spent the first 6 months just trying to regain everyone's trust and not because of anything that I did, because
Yeah.
of potential of doing something. So that was my first real lesson. My first real hard lesson about leadership was in my early 20s. And it
Great
was
story.
something that I had to work to redeem. And it wasn't even my grand idea. So
Right.
not only did I get penalized for it, it was something that the other leaders didn't even have the privy or the benefit to feel the way that I felt. But I cared
Yeah.
so much about that team that I wanted to make sure that they understood that I would advocate for them. So that after graduating from school and getting into that role, that first job was really, really hard for me. And there were a couple times where I really thought that, you know what, this isn't for me. I got to figure out what I wanted to do. And I ended up leaving the organization once we finished the training program and everything else, and my relationship started to improve. I realized that there are bigger companies that have standardized programs that don't need those types of things, that have a bigger support system. And so my first big job in environmental services was working for Aramark. And that was a wonderful lesson in leadership. Funny enough, wasn't healthcare. It was in K through 12. And you want to talk about resource allocation and management. That was probably, I would call that one of my more formative years, because what people don't understand about K through 12 is that let's just say you have 70 employees or 70 colleagues that work for you in schools. Half of them, if not 75% of them, go away in the summertime because there's no school.
Yeah.
You don't need them there. And
Yeah.
so the trick is, how do you give them those few months off so they can go work in other places or other spaces or anything like that? And how do you make sure that the majority of them come back for the beginning of the school year? It is guerrilla management at its finest. And so I have a fair amount of appreciation, I still do, for those teams that work in those spaces, because that's really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, the way it's staffed, the regulatory aspects of certain things are just not there. So it doesn't require the amount of labor. So they work really hard. They're extremely efficient. They are a part of the community. And that's where I really cut my teeth from a leadership standpoint, which got me to Sodexo, post that, working in healthcare. And I found a mentor and someone who told me that I could have been doing more in my Sodexo days, and then everything just took off like a rocket. He's an old United States Marine, facilities leader, ran hospital systems in Hawaii for years before he started working for Sodexo. Was an administrator on the West Coast in California, and basically took me and molded me into what I wanted to be as of today. And I remember I told him I wanted to make the transition from ES to facilities. And he says, why do you want to work for the complaint department? And I never really understood that until I started working in facilities. And understood why they call it the complaint department, which is an inside joke, of course, for us. And I think everybody on the healthcare facilities network would laugh at it. But nobody ever calls us and says, "Hey, I just wanted to say that, man, that pipe looked really good that you fixed the other day." And it's like, it's broken. Come fix it.
Exactly. Well, I actually wrote that down. That would be a good title. Working for the complaint department.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know we talked earlier that we wanted to talk about mentorship, and we talked a little bit about it, but one of the most important things about having someone see potential in you that you never saw in yourself is that it sticks with you. You know, and I think one of the most important things that I always tell people all the time is that I got three voices in my head, and the first one is my mom, unfortunately. I love mom, but she is the voice in my head. The second one is a gentleman by the name of Joe Greeley, the United States Marine, that taught me about leadership and taught me about what it means to fully, dedicate yourself to making sure that your colleagues and their well-being is the most important thing. And I think the third one is my longtime vice president for Sodexo. She's now retired, but Deb Slopes. Those are the three voices in my head. Those are the three people that were instrumental in teaching me about compassion and about strong leadership and about getting everybody to understand what the mission is, what the scope is, like communicating effectively, talking to people and treating people the way that they wanted to be treated. So anytime I talk about these concepts, and I've read a ton of books that talk about leadership, and I think, giving an example with Deb, the vice president that I worked for a long time with Sodexo, she was an avid book reader. So every time she read something that she thought was compelling, she sent it to all her leaders. No one could be harder on you than she was. And she did that intentionally. So when you went out and you represented the organization, you had nothing to fear. And it is maddening when you don't understand the means, like when you don't understand what, like the intent. And it is so refreshing when you get around a completely different group of people and you're absolutely prepared. It's just, I think one of the best advice they ever gave me, especially with Joe, is Joe said, "Hey, Donya, always remember this, that I don't care what you did. I don't care what you did. You know what I care about? Who'd you make?" And he said, don't care. Don't care. Like, he's like, you can throw a resume in front of me. You could have went to Harvard or anything like that. Who'd you bring up with you? Who'd you make? And he believed in coaching trees. Getting back to coaching, he believed that your legacy is defined by the leaders that are keeping on after you're long gone. And he's got a ton of them. He's got a ton of them still working in Sodexo. I can't tell you how many surveyors have walked in from Joint Commission that have worked for that man. And so that's the type of legacy that I want, that I want to make sure I keep safe. I want to protect it, and I want to make sure that I never get too big for my britches to talk about all of my accomplishments or anything that I think I accomplished. What did I do? Like, who did I bring up? Like, who did I give an opportunity to get into leadership and to fulfill the types of dreams and create opportunities for everybody else? So still the same thing, still the same MO. I don't care what the title looks like. I wanna promote. I wanna coach. I wanna train. I wanna develop more leaders. I don't want this to be a dead end for anybody. I want people to realize that they can take this thing to places that I could only dream of, and just be better than me. And
Donya Brown, that's a great place to end our conversation. Thank you for your time and flexibility. I was thinking, you read a lot. Write a book. Write a book.
I might,
I know. I say that not in jest. It's a lot of work, but you got a lot up there. So I appreciate your time this morning.
I appreciate it, as always, and for all the folks that are going to be looking at this, what people don't understand is that you have a very, very, very important part in this process too. Because if I didn't meet you, I wouldn't have been in Columbus in the first place.
That's right.
So
No.
I will never let you live it down, man. I will
Hey,
always be grateful for it.
I always appreciate when they work out because you kind of like what you were saying, you have a responsibility to the folks you work for and the folks that you work with. It was the same thing kind of in the recruiting world, and you were making a move, you moved, you moved out of Texas and you moved north to Ohio and you got a family. So I always like it when they work out. They don't always, but that one did because you feel like you have a responsibility to folks, especially when you contact them and they move. So I always love staying in touch and finding out how it goes. So I appreciate you working with me, and it was great to talk to you. And thank you.
Thanks, Pete. As always.
My pleasure. So, folks, thanks for watching the Healthcare Facilities Network. I'm Peter Martin, Vice President of Business Development at Cref. But that's a little bit different than what it was. Donya, again, thank you for your time and thank you for watching. We will be back with another episode, so stay tuned. Thanks.